Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 4DMethod 4D in Wakanda user group. Today is July 12th, 2017. On our agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about 4DMethod again for those of us who are new to the user group. We're going to discuss some 4D news with Jim Sobczak. We're going to get some of the latest Wakanda news from Jiang Liu. And we're going to do the 4D iNug e-digest. Thanks to Ed Hammond, and we'll have the segment What's to Know the Knowledge Base, where I discuss some of the recent knowledge base articles that are available to partners, well, initially available to partners and then available to everyone else. We'll do the Hey 4D segment, and then we'll move on to our special topic, the 4D ACME Client, a Let's Encrypt client in native 4D code. And Tim Penner will be bringing that to us from 4D. Then we'll have our Q&A and talk about our next meeting, which is on August 30th. So again, I'm Brent Raymond. This is the 4DMethod 4D in Wakanda user group. You can come see our website at 4dmethod.com, where we have recordings of our previous meetings and some other demo content. We can be reached at 4dmethod@gmail.com. We meet regularly to try and tie together a bunch of developers and users of 4D and Wakanda products out there all around the world. We stream our meetings, sometimes more successfully than others, via YouTube Live or Hangouts, depending on what they're branding it as in the current day, to allow people to participate from everywhere. And as I mentioned, all of the meetings are recorded, and the presentations are all out there that were previously presented, and so that you can share them, you can have them into perpetuity. Is that the word? Anyways, forever. And we like to try to provide fresh new content and exposure for all of the users and developers of these applications out there. So I'll kick it over to Jim over at 4D. Jim is the VP of Sales and Services for 4D and also the OEM manager, to talk a little bit about what's going on with 4D.
Great. Thank you, Brent. Welcome from the 4D offices in beautiful Silicon Valley. As you can see, another great California day here. So I hope everyone is enjoying their summer so far. Our thanks to Brent and Ed for allowing us to participate in the 4D and 4DMethod meetings of both the 4D team, the Wakanda team. Really look forward to these meetings. I hope you find our information useful. We're looking forward to Tim's presentation on the 4D ACME client. This should be really interesting. I think it's a timely topic now with security. So that should be really good for all of us. We're only 9 months away from Summit 2018. Here at 4D, we're really geared up for that, deep into preparation. We recently sent out a save the date email to all of you, so hopefully you got that. The dates are April 3rd through April 5th in Washington, D.C. It's the first time we've ever had an event in Washington, D.C. We're looking forward to it. We have a great hotel, a lot of great things to show at the summit. The hotel itself is the Grand Hyatt, which is right downtown. We've secured some great hotel room rates for all of our attendees, much lower than you'll find at any other place in DC at that time of the year. So please start booking your flights to DC in April. It'll be the cherry blossoms will be blooming, hopefully, so it should be a beautiful summit this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. World Tour wrap up. It seems like a long time ago for us here in the US, but the World Tour is still ongoing. It's nearly over. We have 2 more stops in Casablanca, Morocco. So those should be interesting. Those are two-day events. So far, we've had a 12% increase in attendance over our World Tour 2015 events. We're really happy with that. We trained almost 400 developers worldwide in the day 2 training, and that is a 52% increase over the training in World Tour 2015. Here in the US, it was add and JPR. So we know a lot more people turned out here in the US. So that appears to be the case globally. So thank you all for attending. This week in San Jose, we're in the middle of a 3-day training called 4D Essentials. This is day 2 today. It's a training session geared for people new to 4D. We quickly sold out this training session. And after tomorrow, we'll unleash about 15 new 4D developers into the 4D community who will be trained in 4D. So that new training stuff is going really well for us. New releases, I think Brent will be talking about these a little bit. Thank you. There's the slide. Yep. 4D Essentials training. The trainer is Angelo Carapresi. He does a great job. And yeah, so we're filming that. We will try to make that available at some point. New releases include V16R3, which was released a couple weeks ago, June 28th. The next day, we went into beta with R4, V16R4. And I believe Brent will be talking a little bit about those, like I said. But please do visit blog.4d.com, where all of the new features are explained in depth. So we spend a lot of time putting new features up on the blog. So please spend some time with that. We also released V16 Hotfix 2 yesterday. So check out the release notes for that and the bug fix list. So I think that's it for me. Thanks, Brent.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Okay.
I'm just gonna highlight a couple of the new features in R3 that just came out. I'm personally really digging the new object command. You know, a lot of us are starting to use objects more and more within the language, and they're especially useful for containing all the parameters to a method. And so now you can, sometimes it's a little bit of a hassle to create the object beforehand when you're passing over the parameters to the method, but now you can just create it in line when you're calling the method that has a single object as a parameter. So, and it's also a lot more elegant for you know, if you're finding in your database anytime a method is called, you can actually see the parameters back in the method line. So so that's a really nice addition, rounding out object commands. Also, the tabbed windows on Mac OS is nice for keeping things tidy in your development environment. And also more 4D Write Pro, allowing you to have a more easily facilitating the custom interface for 4D Write Pro. So that's you know, that's all great. They're moving really fast with the 4D Write Pro development. Seems like every couple weeks, every 3 or 4 weeks, there's new major features with 4D Write Pro. So that's really good. Yeah, R3 is an exciting release, and as you see, here's a little bit of a code snippet of the new object command. But what's really exciting is R4. You know, I think again, I'm jumping the gun. I'm going directly to the version that's not released yet, but there's just some really great stuff coming down the line here. So R4 is currently in beta testing, so it'll be out soon. But with R4, we get object dot notation. So not only will the accessing of objects be said to be, anyways, 10 times faster, but it's really wonderful for use with your variables and fields. In fact, from what I can see, with a field, a particular attribute of a field could be actually treated as a field itself, and that is just something that's really going to change the way people think about their data structures, and certainly their coding. It'll tidy up again a lot of the code that if you've been taking advantage of the objects to date, well, you'll be able to go back and do some refactoring once this dot notation comes out. So it's a great new development in for the language, and I can't wait to use it myself. So that's R4 coming soon. And now back to Jiang at 4D for the Wakanda news. Jiang is a technical services engineer at 4D. And here you go.
Thank you, Brent. So since our last meeting, Wakanda's been really busy working on two major things. So first of all is the 4D mobile certification of Wakanda 2.x versions. So we're happy to report that we just finished the certification of Wakanda 2.0.3. So right now it is available to download from a 4D product download page. You will be able to download version 1 and version 2. They're both certified and supported at the same time. So for the version 2, enterprise version is requires a license. It is one license that's for development, testing, and deployment. So for anyone, you don't really need a 4D mobile server expansion to download that. So for anyone who has a Developer Pro, when you log into your 4D store, you will be able to see that a link, say download 4D mobile license for Wakanda 2.x on your license list. So you'll be able to download and use it from there. So that's the certification for 4D mobile. Going forward, our next major version is going to be 2.1.0, which is expected very soon. It's going to go through the same testing and certification process. And once we're done with that, it will be available on 4D download as well. So that's the two major things we're working on at this time. I know it's a little confusing because we're maintaining two versions at one time. So so if you find any new problem with the version 2, or you have anything like about licensing, now it's certified, so what's going to support them through the official channels like TAO and all the support channels. So feel free to send us questions, anything. Yeah. So that's that's a Wakanda product news from me. And I understand there's a blog post what we're supposed to talk about. Do you want me to do that, Brent, or do you?
Sure. Yeah, that's probably if you have anything to mention about that.
Sure. Yeah. So I don't know if everyone's reading the Wakanda blogs. So I kind of mentioned that we kind of publish some blogs regularly for developers or some of them are like marketing materials. So last time I mentioned that I wrote the blog for the NGCom. So since our last meeting in May 29th, so there's a new blog. It's called Open Letter to the Developer Community. This is more kind of like a reintroduction of Wakanda. It's more like a full purpose of marketing slash like talking to addressing the community about what Wakanda is, like who we are as Wakanda team, and kind of like, okay, as a product, what is our vision and where we're gonna go, and then more importantly, how we're planning to build the community. This is more generic, because this includes people who never heard Wakanda, or just generically introducing like open source community that's trying to work on some things. So this so the main point of this blog post is to try to break it out of what is Wakanda to everyone, and provide the channels, like how to build a community. We have relaunched our documentation. When we launch our tutorials, we have set up a new GitHub channels, like where you can actually see our code and talk about issues openly. And then this blog, kind of blog, where we publish posts regularly. And we have a GitHub channel, which is a chat room for all the community members. So, and then it talks about a little bit about new features, what's exciting in Wakanda 2, like node workers and virtual data layer, and the ability to connect to external databases. So it's a kind of like an overview of Wakanda. So if you haven't been in touch with Wakanda for a while, you're certainly welcome to revisit this and I kind of hope you get you a better idea of what Wakanda is now. So that's the blog post is about. And going forward, well, we're gonna publish some technical posts as well. It's kind of like 4D blog. There will be something talking about coding features, and there will be something like marketing or like a community. Publish some technical posts as well. Kind of like 4D blog. There will be something talking about coding. Hearing myself.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know where does it come from, but yeah, but actually that's the end of it. So that's I think that's the news from me on product news and the blog post.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much, Young. Yeah, it's there's always a lot of it's very fast development in the Wakanda world, and they're always trying to keep up with the industry and at the same time serve the developers by putting out training materials and examples and trying to keep things compatible version to version. But it's a real challenge, and it's good to know that they're looking to the future with an eye on their development community at the same time. So yeah. While we're on the subject of Wakanda, I'll just pop in and ask a question, unless Eric wanted to ask himself. We had a question here. Is there a way in Wakanda to edit 4D Write Pro documents?
I don't think you can edit 4D Write Pro documents directly, but I think the only way for now is to export it to something like what format does it export it?
Save it in HTML format.
Right. Yeah, I think if you can export it, I was gonna say XML, but HTML would be even better. So you can, since Wakanda is a web platform, so you can edit HTML directly and publish from there. So that's a way to go, as I see.
Yeah.
We haven't tried it, but theoretically,
Yeah, that would be a pretty neat feature to tie the two platforms together. So that definitely might be something worth putting on the list for Wakanda.
Yeah, it sounds like an interesting thing for the feature request. I mean, yeah, that's one of the things that's definitely worth like promoting on the community. Like we have GitHub issues, we have Gitter, when we have Stack Overflow, like anywhere. Hey, if it gets enough buzz, I think the team has seen them all over the place. So yeah, that's a good feature request.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, for the question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Zhang. And next we have the 4D iNug e-Digest from Ed Hammond, where he reviews some of the recent conversations that's happened out on the NUG. I'll just kick it over to you, Ed.
Thanks, Brent. I'm going to preface my segment here with we are in the middle of an electrical storm, and if we disappear suddenly, that's probably the reason. So for the eNUG Digest, this month, we're going to go back to our last meeting, and David Adams started a thread on favorite tricks and keystrokes. Please take one or leave one. I guess that's in the spirit of take a penny, leave a penny. And that's a good thread on all kinds of little tips and tricks currently available within the 4D environment. And it was so inspiring that Sannyasin Siddhanathaswamy, which is a mouthful for me, started a Google Doc with tips, tricks, and that link will be available on the 4DMethod website later on. David Adams, who's apparently awakened from a long snooze over the last year, started a thread on custom comments, lots of tips and more wanted. And what I believe he really meant to type, and there's a typo there, custom constants. The thing that stood out in that thread to me was they were asking for a command for the development environment, which would be reload constants. So as you're adding new constants, you need to restart 4D in order to use them. But Jim Doran's pointed out that if you use Alt-Command-I, you can restart the interpreted environment without having to relaunch 4D directly. That stuck in my mind. David Adams also asked the question, how do you get the names of shared methods from a component? And after some discussion, there was a solution provided by Wayne Stewart. Lee Hinde decided to ask a question about web serving on OSX server platform, which had a great setup guide included in that thread by Ronald Russell. Justin Levins was asking about LDAP user validation. Lots of information was provided there, links to 4D tips and tech notes. And if you're looking for LDAP in your application, that's a good thread to follow. Pat Bensky posed a question concerning modal dialogues and a dilemma where there was bleed through of information from one window to another, and that sort of morphed into an excellent posting by Jody Bevan about application development in the current 4D environment and what the options are, and perhaps a new shell that he's developing for his own custom application. Chip Scheide had posting on compiled components and different 4D versions, and how if you compile for one, it can go to different ones as long as you're not adding or depending on features for a later version. Sannyasin Siddhanathaswamy also had a posting on data tables tips. Data tables apparently is a JavaScript tables widget, and a lot of people were chiming in on how to use that with 4D and the object options that are available in 4D and converting things to and from JSON. And there was an announcement by Chip Scheide about a 4D set component. And it looks like I've made it all the way through without us losing power. So I'm going to turn it back over to Brent.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, set component, cool. Yeah, that's those are all good things. New frameworks, set component, and a lot of good discussion out there. So, yeah, definitely check out the 4DMethod website under the tab for e-digests for a list of recent topics that Ed compiles at each meeting. And also, there's a few links here on this slide for how to register for the INUG itself, and where to see the discussion online. So yeah, as usual, all good topics, and thanks so much for watching out on the NUG for us, Ed. So next we have what's to know in the knowledge base. A few topics, a few articles that jumped out at me were one of them being managing custom constants with code. I believe that was prepared by David Adams and Cannon Smith, with sharing a bit of their code for manipulating and organizing their custom constants. I am personally a big fan of constants, and I'm always looking for ways to better leverage the constants in the code. I mean, they really add a lot of clarity, and the fact that they type ahead complete can really add some regularity and speed to your development. So yeah, so check it out. Another one is 4DMobile customized data display using locale. Is that how you say locale? Locale. I don't think it's a vegetable, but but you know, it's basically where the person who's connecting to your website is coming from. So all that information is made available on the server, and you're able to through 4DMobile have some ability to customize according to expected locales for, and of course 4DMobile is used as a bridge between a 4D database and Wakanda, and so you're able to customize 4D data according to where people are connecting to your Wakanda web application, where in the world they're connecting from. So that's really neat capability of that for 4DMobile. Zhang's done a few tech notes on how to format 4D data through 4DMobile, and this is another really interesting approach. And next we have the setting the list box last column width to prevent text overflow. Again, another nice utility method. The knowledge base is just chock full of utility methods and essentially free code that you know, serve a lot of common problems that us developers have when we're trying to handle our interfaces and whatnot. And this is a simple one, but very useful in that as you resize a window and in turn resize a list box, you can have it automatically recalculate the last column's width so that the ellipses appear at the end of the text instead of having it bleed over for another several hundred pixels or however big the column was originally. That can also help to stop the horizontal scroll bar from being necessary. But anyways, it's just again nice code that is shared on the knowledge base for all of us developers. Right. So next we have Hey 4D. You know, as we were talking about custom constants, we currently get help tips for constants showing their values when you are in the 4D debugger window. So when you hover over a constant, it'll tell you its type and its value. However, I often find myself really missing that when I'm coding in the method editor. So that would be really great because you know, constants are creeping into my code in all kinds of new places, including as attribute names for objects, property names, and so it would be great to know what the text, actual text value of that property name would be without having to load up a debugger window or the runtime explorer. So yeah, so as usual, Hey 4D, it'd be a lot cooler if you did include that. So thank you very much. Yeah, and so if you have a feature request or you want to vote on some feature requests that people have put out there in the past, there's a nice knowledge base article on how to actually vote. There's a link here, and if you do follow the instructions, you'll end up at the forum, and you'll add star ratings to the feature requests there in the forum. So check it out. Share your good ideas. Vote on the ideas to give them priority for the developers who create 4D in Wakanda. So, and now on to our special topic about the 4D ACME Client, a Let's Encrypt client and native 4D code. Now, if you have attended some of our meetings in the past, the 4DMethod meetings, or if you have browsed the knowledge base, you might have seen some write-ups about this. I believe there's actually 2 articles about this client, and and it comes to us from Tim Penner. Tim Penner joined 4D in 2006, so he's been there for several years. He was previously a network engineer and IT consultant. I'm not sure, is Tim actually the longest serving member of the technical services group, or just one of the longest serving members? But he works at the North American office there in San Jose. And he's a very active producer of content for the knowledge base. I can't say enough about the quality of material that's made available in the knowledge base, and he is definitely one of the main submitters of that material. So, anyways, I'm going to hand it over to Tim, and he can tell us a little bit more about this Let's Encrypt client that he's created for everyone.
Great, thank you. So just to get started, so the idea here behind the Let's Encrypt movement is to really make it a lot easier for everybody to get SSL certificates for their web server. I mean, this whole movement, I think, started probably about 3 years ago when Edward Snowden dumped a bunch of NSA documents, and everybody really started to realize that a lot more stuff needs to be encrypted than it was at that time. So, for example, a lot of people would just encrypt things that required like password credentials and stuff like that. However, now, I mean, the Hangouts that we're on right now is encrypted. YouTube uses encryption, SSL. Netflix uses SSL. So, I mean, it's pretty much everything is being encrypted now, and there's really no reason not to be encrypting your traffic. I think that the number one thing that prevents people from wanting to do that themselves is the administrative task of doing it itself. Usually there's there's a little bit of a cost associated with getting a SSL certificate, but that can be budgeted. It's just the administrative task of getting the actual certificate, applying it to the server, remembering to renew it, things like that. It becomes a task. So what people used to do, or still sometimes do, is if it doesn't need it, let's just not complicate things and add SSL. Well, Let's Encrypt tries to address that by making it free. First off, it's free, and it's automated. It can be automated. So it uses a REST service, and you post a JSON object. It's actually a JSON web signature object over HTTPS to the server, to the Let's Encrypt server. And through a nice little dance of submitting some information and getting a response and encrypting that response and making that encrypted response available via the web server, you can validate yourself. And by validating yourself as owning that domain name, that is enough to get a domain validated certificate, which is plenty to secure your website. It's actually plenty to get an A- rating on SSL Labs, which I'm about to demonstrate now. So let me just share my screen here and get rid of that. Let's see. So I'm just making sure that my site's not currently available, and I don't currently have any SSL certificate there. Good. So let me just open up my GUI here. Actually, hold on. There we go. No certificate found. Perfect. Okay, so this is the GUI that I had created for this client, which the GUI isn't necessarily needed for the automated portion of it, but the GUI is good for testing to make sure that you have everything set up properly. So what we need to do is we need to fill in our email address here, and we need to fill in our domain. I'm actually going to detect the domain here. So some of the requirements for using this would be having a web server license within 4D, because you need to run the web server. But you also need to have your web server publicly available over the standard port 80. The reason for that is the information that you transmit to the Let's Encrypt server, you need to make that available. The information you get back from the Let's Encrypt server, you need to make that available via port 80 so that you can then tell the Let's Encrypt server, yes, it's available now. They'll then check to see that it's there, which is the process of validating your domain. So if you do not have a publicly accessible domain, a publicly accessible web server, this actually would not work for you. But most people that have a website that they want to secure, it's usually publicly accessible. So there we go. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and run this right now with the staging server. And the staging server is just used so that we can, validate that it's working without actually exhausting our rate limit with the real server. So because we got this right here, this actually means that it worked. We got all the way through to the end, and it's asking whether or not we'd like to copy the certificate to the actual database folder and restart the web server. I'm going to go ahead and choose no because of the fact that it was the staging server. But since it all worked, I'm going to uncheck the staging server now, and I'm going to run it again. And there it worked, which is good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, which copies it into the right location and restarts the web server. Now that the web server has been restarted, actually, it looks like my code quit. Just a second. Definitely not expected. Okay, so it looks like the certificate did get copied in. That was not expected though. So let's open up the HTTPS site and, oh, you know what? I did not start my web server. Sorry. There we go. So right off the bat, I did get a certificate from Let's Encrypt. And I'd like to demonstrate what it actually looks like when I do a Qualys SSL Labs check on it. I know what I'm going to get here. It's actually going to take maybe 30 seconds to a minute to complete. But essentially, right off the bat, just everything stock with this SSL certificate, we can get a B rating, which isn't that great, but the reason why we get a B rating is just because of the cipher suite. The default cipher suite actually includes RC4, but we can easily correct that. The code to correct the cipher suite is extremely short, so I'm actually just going to show it here real quick. I mean, this is the code that corrects the cipher suite. Basically, it's allowing all except for RC4, null, low, triple des, MD5, exported certificates. Ciphers. So just running this code right here is going to change the cipher suite, which means that, so again, this just completed, we got a B. B is capped, it's capped at B because of the fact that we have the RC4. However, I just changed the cipher suite. So by clearing that cache and running it again, we should get an A- rating. And to me, I mean, I think that's pretty good for, no cost involved, automating the process of actually getting the certificate. One thing I should point out during this time frame that we're waiting, the certificates that you get from Let's Encrypt, they are relatively short. They're about 3 months in duration when you get them. But the expectation is that you're going to automate the process and you're going to check the duration that's remaining. And probably when you get to about 30 days remaining in the duration, that's when you're going to renew it, just by issuing a new request for a certificate. So even though the duration is 3 months, it shouldn't really matter because the whole process should be automated anyways. So it just doesn't matter. Here we go. So we now have an A- rating, which the only reason why it's an A- rating is because the server doesn't actually support forward secrecy. So it's capped at an A-. But there is a feature request for that coming down the pipe. So hopefully that will eventually be increased to, I don't know if it goes to A+ or just A, but there we go. This can also be automated via code. I mean, I showed it via the GUI because that's easier for actually setting things up. But this is a sample method that you can use. This is actually in the tech note, but basically, I mean, the only thing that you really need to set up is we're setting up an object, and we're just adding to that object what our contact information is and what our domain name is. And then we're going to, at first, in this example, we're going to send that to the staging server again, right here. And then afterwards, we're going to check to see that the certificate was actually defined within the object. If it is defined, we're going to go ahead and redo the same thing, but we're going to set the server to be the actual main server instead of the staging server, and just run the same method again. After running it, we check again to see if the certs are defined, and if they are, we can do whatever we want with the certificates. One other thing I forgot to mention, which I should mention because it might be useful to people, is that Let's Encrypt doesn't actually support wildcard certificates, but what they do support is the subject alt name X509v3 extension, which basically allows you to specify multiple domain names within a single certificate. So this one certificate can actually be fully authorized to serve SSL encrypted content for multiple domains. So you might serve multiple sites within the same server, or maybe you want to, use the same certificate on multiple servers, which usually you wouldn't want to do that. But in either case, you can use multiple domain names, which is very useful. For example, with just, for example, www.something.com in addition to something.com. There you go. That's two certificates or two domain names. So this example that I have here, though, the idea is that the developer would basically run this type of code within their own scheduler. That they could most developers have some sort of a scheduler that they use within their own application that they've developed. I didn't want to reinvent that wheel for this tech note. So that's basically it, the summary of it. Do you have any questions?
Well, I mean, I think I double down on the fact that, this is a free, these kind of certificates, they can run what, like $100 for one certificate?
Yeah, easily they can run $100 to $150, $300, depending on the certificate authority that you go through.
Right, and
there's also different levels of certificate. There's domain validated, organization validated, and extended validation. So those higher validation certificates usually cost more, but the ones that you get from Let's Encrypt is actually just domain validated, because that's how they do the validation. They're validating you through your domain name. So you get a higher level of, what's the word I'm looking for here? There's a higher reputation that's associated with the organization validation, because it'll say your organization within the certificate. You can't really get that with Let's Encrypt, but it's not needed for just simple SSL. The extended validation is the one that gets you the nice green bar up here that has the name of the actual site that you're looking at. Again, that's extended validation, which would not fit the Let's Encrypt mantra of just automating the process over domain validation. So, I mean, the certificate is on the lower end of what you can get, but that doesn't really change the type of encryption you get. It just changes the type of display that it shows up at the top to your end user.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, putting the emphasis on the fact that, I mean, so much of the use of 4D these days is to interact and to serve web content and to interact with other servers. And obviously, encryption is ought to be a default these days for anyone who's going to do anything on the web. And this, especially considering that it has a short expiry time after 3 months. So you're if you do integrate this as an automated feature into your applications, it's a wonderful selling point that you have automatically the certificates and the security and encryption updating itself on a regular basis, free of cost, without any kind of oversight or maintenance. And I think that's really something that would be of value for anyone that is running a 4D web server out there for serving web content. So, again, I think it's pretty cool, and people ought to find it absolutely useful in this day and age. So let me see if there's a question, an unrelated question in Reddit there, but let me see if there's anything else that's popped up in the meantime. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's thanks for the demo, and just wanted to mention that the TechNote links are right here. It's under the name ACME Client Component for 4D Part 1 and 2, and that's Tim. And so if we don't have any other questions,
Not seeing the slide.
oh, back to me, right? Okay, there's Tim. And right, and so here's the links in the slides for the meeting, so you can go directly to the component. Again, it has the code and a white paper associated with parts 1 and 2 of the write-up for this component. Again, terrific value for the 4D community to be able to have this basically prepared for them for free. So anyways, thanks again to Tim. We did have one question from Reddit that's unrelated to the ACME component. Are the hot fixes incorporated into the betas of the R releases? Perhaps someone could answer that.
I could probably answer that. I mean, it's the bug fixes that go into the hot fixes are typically put into the main development branch first before they go into like 15 or 16. So the betas of the R release are built off of that main branch, are branched from the main branch. So typically they are included in there. However, once the beta goes to the production and is no longer in beta, there's no more changes in that R release until the next R release. So, I mean, it all depends on timing of when the actual bug fix made it into the main branch. But typically, it's going to make it into that main branch and into the next R release prior to making it into any of the .x releases, which is what the hotfix would have been from. So,
I see. Is there a way to know what main branch release that an R release was branched from? Well,
there's only one main branch. The main branch is always main. So like 16R2 was branched off of the main branch at that time when it was branched. And then when 16R2 became available, we did the beta testing of 16R3, which is about the time that we would have branched R3 from main. But main, it was still main. The only thing different in main is just the time frame.
Right. So is there a way to know, say, for instance, with R4, was it branched from .1 or
No. .1 was branched off of main a long time ago.
They are separate.
They're
Right.
separate branches. They're all different branches of the repository.
Okay. All right. So I don't risk confusing anyone else. I'll just.
Another way
I'll
to look
stop.
at it is the R release or the hotfixes don't get changes from 16.1. 16.1 and the R releases get the changes from main.
Gotcha.
Everything gets the changes from main. It comes from main down.
Yeah, I think we have an explanation of how that works on our website there, but there's also a really good summit presentation, actually a while ago, but it's still appropriate now. When we started doing our releases, Caroline Brio did a summit presentation that's on the website now, talking about the main branch and how things are split off the main branch, whether it be an R release or a .x release or a hotfix or whatever. So it really is about timing. It's not a, like Tim was saying, it's all about timing. So
Okay, great. All right. I think that's all for right now. Just talk a little bit about our next meeting. It'll be on August 23rd. It'll be a little bit at a little bit of a different time because our presenter, David Adams, will be connecting to us from Australia, where he lives. And he'll be sharing a topic called a publish subscribe component for 4D, which is really cool. It's all completely based on workers and call form. So it's a modern approach to handling events and forms and in your interface, so that say a graph can subscribe to events for a button, but you can also have very many subscribers to events from that button in addition to the graph. So it's a really neat way to tie together your interface. We have 2 open dates, October 4th and November 15th, where we're still looking for people who'd like to share some content. Again, it's a great way to show everyone what you've been working on and to share perhaps your application and what it does, and to give some inspiration to the rest of the community. So just to wrap up here, thank you again to Tim for the presentation and the component. It's really great stuff. I'll just check Reddit one more time and the live chat from YouTube. And if no one else has any other comments, then we'll just try and end it on time within an hour for this meeting. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone, and look forward to seeing you in the next meeting. Okay. Thanks to everyone at 4D. Yep. All right. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you next time.
okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.